next conversation is Kryptonite, Implications of the Blockchain on Education and Talent Systems. And we have led by Tom Vander. Where's Tom? There we go. Dave Balter and Philipp Schmidt from MIT. Dave is a former education technology startup founder. He's founded Smarterer, which he sold to Pluralsight, and I was a very happy investor. So I'm now backing Dave in his Flipside crypto venture as well on a small basis. Take it away.
Thank you, Deborah. Man, that's going to be hard to follow. Thank you. For somebody who's dabbled in and around entrepreneurship for 20 years, that's one of the best chats that I've ever heard. Can we give him another hand for that? There's a lot of lessons in failure. For somebody who's invested billions as a private company CFO, as a philanthropist and a venture capitalist, I've failed more than most people have tried. So I loved all your stories. Deborah couldn't find anybody else to talk about blockchain, so she asked me. When you think about blockchain, when I say blockchain, what do you think?
Security.
What do you think? Blockchain.
Trying to figure it out.
Question mark. What do you think when you think blockchain? If you got it in a pitch.
Distributed governance.
Okay. Eric, when you hear blockchain, what do you think?
Getting rid of the middleman.
Good. All these people know what blockchain. Do you, Hannah? What do you think about blockchain?
Big fat zero. I have no idea what I think about it.
How many people here have made a cryptocurrency investment? Have you made one?
I want to tell you what I think I know about blockchain. That it allows the Rolling Stones to sell a ticket to a specific user, and that ticket cannot be resold to another person, and they can control the process from beginning to end. I believe blockchain allows that.
Great. We're going to ask Dave to see if that's true. Martin, what do you think of when you hear blockchain?
Well, I think about certification and licensure.
Jamie, how about you?
Minecraft. Why? I'm just kidding.
Good to see you, Jamie. Dave Balter. Well, first of all, Dave, you got to tell us why you went from a really respectable category like psychometrics to cryptocurrency. Like, how the hell did you jump the shark? So give us that story.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'll just say following Bill is always very hard. And he reminds me, I'm in a new industry, and coming back into a space, you see people again, you sort of relearn. It's a pleasure to be back in this industry. I've been around since 2015, and I'm still proud of what everyone's trying to achieve here. It's very cool. So I will say that there was a stop in between. I left the education space. I left Pluralsight in 2015 and decided to build a business in the death industry. Actually dying. I have all the jokes, endless supply. It was a grave situation. Sorry for coughing. You got, okay. I have all those. In the middle of building that business, which was venture backed, we were doing okay. It looked like it was going to take a long time to make the company work, and we really caught the cryptocurrency bug. We started trading at night. We had one of our co-founders, one of the guys from Smarter, actually had built algorithms for swing trading and hedge funds, and we borrowed that algorithm to begin trading in the evening. And the light bulb moment for us came when our head of product at that death industry company showed up and said, he knocked on the door as we were trading at 8 p.m. and he said, "I just want you guys to know it feels like you've joined a different tribe." And we were like, what are you talking about? And then he left, and we're like, oh shit, we got a problem here. And so we asked our VCs, hey, we got these two businesses, and the VCs said, you guys pick, it's up to you. And so we took some time and said, cryptocurrency has a bright future. It's going to take a lot of work. It's inspiring. It's like this industry. The people are amazing, very talented. And so we shut down that company and moved the capital over and began building.
Does it ever feel like you're going from death to cryptocurrency back to death?
Yeah, there's probably a 50% chance crypto will die. It's probably not true. It's probably more like 10%. But running a startup every day is both a journey of opportunity, and there are days that feel like you're dying on the vine and you're figuring it out. So
Dave, we're gonna circle back to cryptocurrencies later in our conversation, but I want to talk about blockchain and sort of more broadly distributed ledger, and we got really good attributes of blockchain from the audience. Could you give us a definition of what is blockchain, or more broadly distributed ledger?
yeah, so this is, I think people hit most of this pretty well. I will say for the Rolling Stones concept, that is entirely correct. Sarah, who's in the back, is invested in a company that does ticketing on the blockchain. What's that called? Tracer. Everyone look up Tracer. I think what's more important than you being able to buy a ticket and not being able to quote unquote resell it is that the Rolling Stones could allow you to resell it in a way that they will get a piece of the action. Okay, so the truth of putting a ticket into the blockchain is you're now able to track it inherently and maintain where it goes. So the Stones could be like, yeah, first person can buy it. If you want to sell it and make a premium on it, we still get our 20% of that. That's pretty cool.
I want to come back to you. Sarah, stand up and tell us what what Tracer does.
Tracer does what Dave just described. So they have a ticketing, blockchain-enabled ticketing platform that enables you to issue the ticket, determine where it can be sold, for how much, who receives the revenue, and so in turn, you ultimately can block all secondary sales and completely kill the secondary market.
Thank you, Dave. What segment is distributed ledger technology being most widely used in today?
So let's just to back up to the first question, but the whole premise of blockchain technology, it allows people to transact between each other without a quote-unquote trusted third party. If you've ever gone to do a wire transfer or gone to do something with a bank, there is a third party in the middle, and that third party is quote-unquote trusted, but they can do a lot of things like make mistakes, they can charge you fees, they can take a long time to process the transaction, and so what the technology really does is allows this transaction to happen without anyone in the middle, and with a 100% guarantee that it can't be defrauded or otherwise. So you now are in control of your systematized approach to whatever you want to do. That can be applied to things like finance, where this is really all sort of bubbling up. How does it transform the ability to send payments globally between individuals, between companies? But also, I think maybe more importantly, through things like identity. The thing that has me most frustrated, as many of you, it's, once a week now, my credit card company, I get some charge on it. I can't imagine like how someone got it. Our data is now rife in everyone's pocket. And that's going to start to get contained. The blockchain, in essence, allows you to begin doing that. Here is my data. It is protected here. These companies that are using it for certain things get permission to do that, much like the Stones would get permission to take a fee if they resell the ticket, and you're now protected. So the idea of it, maybe the most simple way to think about it is like actually a really, really good database that can't be broken, that you can use individually with any other person that you want to transact with. And that can be pretty groundbreaking for any industry.
So there's not a lot of it in ed tech yet, but what other sectors have gone long on distributed ledger?
So certainly finance. That is, the ultimate beginning is Bitcoin, which most people know, and that is in the intent to be a better financial transaction, maybe a store of value. A company in that space, Ripple, is probably truly lots of people have opinions on Ripple, but they're truly the closest to building a true global payment system that is transacted on the blockchain. Identity is definitely a big one. So there are lots of companies working on ideas around identity. Supply chain is another good one. We see a lot of issues happening in food. You can't eat romaine for 7 days or whatever it is. They're to fix that. They are trying to understand which distributor, wholesaler, manufacturer is distributing this food product. If a supply chain was tracking where that romaine came from and all the way through the supply chain, a lot easier to do things like that.
Right. If you go to the IBM website and look up blockchain, they have a big blockchain practice. There's a video of a coffee producer, and they can use blockchain to verify that it was grown at 6,000 feet in Colombia, so you know exactly where a single source batch of beans have come from. You can do the same thing with tomato or romaine lettuce. So instead of that crazy thing, how many of you panicked when you couldn't get romaine on your taco in October? Right? It was awful. But now you can track lettuce back to a particular field in Mexico and know exactly where the supply came from instead of having a national lockdown on tacos and romaine.
Blockchain will solve lettuce. That is the tweet everybody should send out.
Right. So Philipp Schmidt leads innovations and learning at the MIT Media Lab. I think Philipp, this stuff started emerging about 10 years ago, and you were really one of the first people to get excited about open badges and about using blockchain when it comes to academic credentials. Can you tell us about when you discovered this and put these ideas together?
Sure, yeah. I got into the credentialing space more with an eye on increasing opportunity for people to translate more diverse educational experiences into better jobs or more opportunities. So I saw that we talked about this a little bit before, kind of there are these well-respected, well-understood large credentials that we use to get jobs, but then we learn lots of things in other settings through other institutions, and we don't really have a good way of recognizing that when we apply for a job or we apply for a graduate degree somewhere. And so I became interested in, is there a way to use technology to better describe what people are learning, but then also make that transactable in a way, like unlocking your academic capital and potentially your social capital, which we talked about quite a bit yesterday. And right now with academic credentials, the case isn't so much that there's a middleman we're trying to get rid of. The case is that if you're trying to verify your academic credentials, you have to go to thousands of institutions that all do this in a slightly different way, usually involving a fax machine. And so the process is very complicated, not very trustworthy, and these credentials are kind of locked inside the institutions that issued them rather than being in the control of the individuals who received them. And so when a few years ago people started, the blockchain hype, what I would say, kind of kicked off, we started looking at do blockchains give us some features that would be useful in the context of building these systems. And I should say, I think the blockchain has had a little bit of an unfortunate history or public ledgers, in that they're kind of at the level that the internet was at in the late 80s. People haven't really found those massive applications yet. But then you have Bitcoin exploding. And so on one hand, there's this gigantic hype. Everyone's talking about blockchains. On the other hand, the technology is just really starting to get interesting now. And so there's kind of expectations are oversized. Applications aren't quite there yet. I think we're going to go through this. Oh, no, this was just a fad. I think we're going to come out of that. But there are only two people on the stage here right now. I think a year ago there would have been like 8 talking about how this is going to solve everything. But anyway, so I think for academic credentials, it's like an obvious use case that you could use the blockchain for.
So there's a link to the last panel that we had on competency-based education, the dialogue. As learning options expand and people begin mixing and matching degrees and credentials and learning experiences, so they're coming from more and more sources, then security and portability become a bigger and bigger issue. So it feels like we're sort of growing into the need for first open badges that you developed 10 years ago, and then the idea of a blockchain or a distributed ledger transcript, right?
Yeah, and I think we made a strategic, error, maybe when we launched open badges, partly in the name, because badges signaled these are low stakes credentials. These are things you do in an after school program. And so people didn't fully take them seriously. And then secondly, the technical infrastructure to actually do anything with the badges wasn't there. So it was a great idea. Lots of people got excited about it. Lots of people actually got involved. But then we didn't see that translating into admissions processes or hiring or better jobs. And so now we kind of took a slightly different route. we're working with higher education institutions. And actually, this hasn't been announced yet, but and it doesn't have a name yet, so it's the group of 9 right now. But there are 9 higher education institutions, including MIT and Harvard and Berkeley and Delft in the Netherlands and Technical University in Munich, that are working together to figure out what the standard for these digital credentials should be. But then also, and this I think is the harder question, is how do you govern that? Who controls what is in the standard? Who controls who can issue? And kind of coming back to your question, we decided to now start with university diplomas because we think that will drive adoption in a way that starting with the badges never really did.
So the organization that was launched, how long ago was BlockCerts formed?
So there's a little bit of confusion over the name BlockCert. So at the Media Lab, we built a few prototypes for issuing academic credentials that were anchored initially on the Bitcoin blockchain. Yeah, now you could anchor them on pretty much any blockchain. We released, for us, this was a research project. We released all of our software under the MIT open source license, which allows commercial use. With the hope that lots of people would take the software and build products on top of it, and there'd be this experimentation. And what happened is there's one company that got involved early on and built a very successful in the space commercial product on top of BlockCerts. And there is a great community of people now experimenting and using it, but it didn't really take off in the way that I had hoped. And so that standard is called BlockCerts right now, but there is some confusion over, is it also the commercial product? It actually technically is not, but BlockCerts is the standard underlying the technical product.
Was Connie Yowell at MacArthur involved in the birth of Open Badges?
Yes.
So Paul LeBlanc is here from Southern New Hampshire University, and in what I think was the most interesting acquisition of 2018, SNHU acquired LRNG, a Chicago-based nonprofit that was dedicated to extending learning opportunities to urban youth around America. And Connie started at MacArthur and really was a pioneer impact investor in open badges. And when she left to launch LRNG, it was using the open badge standard to really credential learning experiences for kids. What makes the LRNG SNHU merger so interesting is you think about a playlist for a group of kids that create badges and then stack into credentials that stack into SNHU credits. And I think you've got a really, really interesting learning ecosystem forming. But as more and more kids earn a greater number of badges, in coordination with more and more community organizations, you can imagine some of the security issues associated with that, and it's quite possible that these learning ecosystems will move into blockchain for security and portability. Do you see that happening more widely?
Yes, I mean, I think the potential is there. The goal is to never put any personally identifiable information on the blockchain directly, because one of the features, at least of the blockchains we frequently talk about, they're public. So anyone can write to them and anyone can read what's on the blockchain. So you don't want to put names or dates or anything that's human readable onto the blockchain, but you could do this in a way that allows people to either completely hide what they're doing academically, or to only choose what they're disclosing to employers or to other institutions.
So, Dave, I'm curious. Think back to Smarter, and you were really a leader in skills assessment, in trying to assess. Earlier, we talked about measuring what matters and credentialing, that really hard to measure stuff. And Dave was a real pioneer in that space. Have you made the connection between what you were doing at Smarter and potential applications in blockchain?
No.
Why?
I would say.
Why would you say?
Well,
is it too much trouble?
So like any industry, things are continuing to evolve, et cetera. When we sold Smarter, it was a simplified system for allowing anyone to create any test on anything, allowing anyone to add questions to it, and then a very sophisticated algorithm that would let other people come take the test and get a score, a skill score, let's say, in 10 questions. Okay, so our whole philosophy was around sort of releasing this ability for people to get validated in their skill set against everybody else in the market in a very efficient time frame. I think the blockchain presents a different type of solution, the other side of, well, once you have a skill, how are you verified, right? There's 500,000 fake degrees out there right now in America at this time, right? So there's lots of people who are creating, I went here, I did this, my skill is this, et cetera, or I can put on my resume, I'm good at this, I'm proficient at Excel. Well, I don't know if that's true or not. So the blockchain, to me, solves a very different side, which is once you have that skill, once you've had a way to take the test or get assessed, how is the person who is looking to hire you or validate you or work with you able to say, is that real or not?
Right.
Okay. So the connection, you could say, yeah, the downstream connection is we've got a great assessment engine, credentialing system, whatever it is, and then there's a way to verify it using blockchain. There are pioneers in this industry who have come after us, and maybe they're doing that. I don't know.
We're going to move on and talk about some other applications beyond the transcript, but I want to pause and see if anybody wants to ask these guys a question about badging or transcripts on blockchain, distributed ledger. Any questions or comments or examples on that? All right, I'll ask another quick one. Matt Patinsky is a friend of this group. He's often at these gatherings. He runs Parchment, which is a leading transcript management organization. In a recent podcast with him, I asked Matt if he saw portfolios moving to blockchain, not just transcripts, but an entire student portfolio. And Matt would say, because blockchain is still computationally intensive, he thinks there'll just be directories, a transcript as a directory that points out to forms of evidence rather than a whole portfolio. What's your take on that, Philipp?
Yeah, I think the process of verification, a claim, will be on the blockchain. So some institution says this person was a student and they got this degree. That process is efficient to handle on a blockchain. The degree itself, the materials that would go in the portfolio, you wouldn't want to put those things on a blockchain. And you could put them on distributed ledgers. There's file systems now that use the same technology. IPFS is an example, which actually has an amazing acronym, the Interplanetary File System. They didn't lack ambition, I think, when they launched that. But anyway, you could put the data as well in those decentralized systems, but you could also keep that in a personal Dropbox or Parchment or wherever you feel comfortable storing your personal data.
So Dave, what other applications of distributed ledger are you excited about when it comes to education or learning businesses? Are there back office applications that you see?
Yeah. So I think my philosophy is pretty basic for ed tech. So it's either credentialing, which I think we talked a bit about. It's micropayments, the foundational philosophy of the whole blockchain beginning is really in the sort of common world now is about payments, and then it's identity. So those three, and they intersect and interact. But if you I suppose I'd probably think of blockchain not as something that's going to come in and take over a space. It's going to become an element most of us don't see in the operating system of that space. And so, let's use something obvious. Is there going to be some digital currency that takes over the dollar? No, but fiat currency will be fueled underneath by blockchain technology that allows it to be controlled in some form and system, right? Allows it to be protected. Right. Same thing in this industry. No one's going to wake up someday and be like, some blockchain app just took over all of education. Like everything is on the blockchain. It's going to be much more subtle than that. These tools are now being built here. It's an easier way to transact between people. Things are protected. People, maybe on your front end, you're able to send your credential. You don't even know it's going through blockchain technology, but the system behind it will be protecting it.
Well, let's do a quick deep dive into crypto. Cryptocurrencies lost a basket, probably lost 70% of their value last year, right? Bitcoin, if you look December to December, went from almost 20,000 to don't know, 33,000, right? So is there, are we going to see cryptocurrency payments for any of the apps that folks are thinking about here? Second question is, do you see things like stablecoin linking it to real currencies? Is that part of the solution, or?
Yeah. So one of the problems with this space is that we all value it based on the speculation behavior that's been happening. It's like let's see, everyone got FOMO last year. Let's see if I can make a lot of money. I'm a genius because I invested in Bitcoin at 4,000 and it went to 20. Somehow I'm smart. I'm now an idiot because I bought at 20 and it went to 3. It's meaningless, right? You're just guessing at this point. The real truth and what we do in this industry is these are businesses. Okay, so some people probably heard Apple's earning call yesterday. 1.4 billion devices now have installed Apple software or Apple's tools. iPhone sales went down 15%. They increased other product lines. Okay, when we talk about companies, we don't start with, is it stock? Should I buy it at X or Y? We start at, is it a real company? Are there customers using this product? And is there product development behavior that would indicate that the business has a long-term life cycle? And so what we do in this industry is we go in and we download, digest billions of blockchain transactions in real time, and we mark every one of those addresses to understand where there's actual customer activity that's happening. So we're able to look at a project, a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or anything else that's being built in this space, and we're able to say, okay, forget the price. I don't care if it's at 3,500. I want to know, actually, is this a real company? Are there people using it or not? Okay, and we help those companies who are in the space understand their own customer activity, and then investors understand whether they should be looking at these things from a real perspective. So when I hear the price question, it's like, stop. Everyone's got to stop. It's not about making money on the speculation. It's about which is a real business, and can you understand it? And if you're we're all smart people. If you invest in businesses that have customer growth and product development growth, it's probably going to grow in revenue and value over time, right? So that's what we do.
Questions about blockchain or distributed ledger for these guys, Deborah?
I'm back to the pricing. So, but can it be a real business? I mean, does the volatility need to
be shrunk,
come into the middle before it can be a real business? I guess that's my...
Yeah. I mean, the volatility, if it's going to be a payment product, you got to get rid of the volatility. There's no question. And we could talk about Bitcoin, second layer protocols, Lightning Network's going to make it faster than Visa and MasterCard. So you're going to be able to transact, but if it's too volatile, it won't work, right? I'm not going to buy my Starbucks and then wonder why it cost me $1,000 next week, right? Okay. So that's why stable coins come in. They're tied to the dollar, et cetera. The dollar has its own issues in its changing in value, largely because of the trusted third party that happens to be our government. And so you're going to have to solve some of that at the same time. But I do believe for it to be used as a payment, yes, it needs stability. It needs to have volatility pulled out of it. And it's probably not an investable in the way we're all, quickly either trying to make money on it or not.
Philipp, are there...
So you should have invested in our fund, yes. Thanks.
Philipp, are there back office applications that you think are going to be useful for learning institutions?
Well, you mentioned identity. I think identity is going to be one application, both on the student side and on the institution side. But I think of it more as a lot of the universities have something called EduRoam, which is a federated authentication system where if you go to someone else's campus, you can log into the Wi-Fi network there. They never see your credentials. They just pass the request on to the issuing institution. So that's a pretty good system, and I don't see why you would need to replace that as long as it works. But what if your home institution isn't reachable, right? Whatever reason their servers are down, or what if your home institution doesn't participate? Like if you could have a self-sovereign identity, I think, is overselling it, but if you could have some way of authenticating without having to go back to your home institution that would let you participate in these networks, I think that's a pretty interesting application. I think universities actually could play an interesting role being issuers of identity to both their faculty and staff, but also to their students, and then think about how that lets them build a relationship with their students beyond the time when they're on campus.
Hi, can you guys talk a little bit more about the technology underlining blockchain? Anything interesting that you guys have seen to increase speed, especially at scale? on the tech side?
I mean, Lightning Protocol, which actually was the white paper was written by someone who's here at MIT in the Digital Currency Initiative, working for Neha, who I know you know. So people are thinking about transaction speed. There's kind of a more fundamental shift from the way that all these servers agree what's in the blockchain. There are two mechanisms: proof of claim and proof of stake, and proof of work and proof of stake. And I don't know how much we want to go into the details, but one is much more efficient. People are starting to think about maybe Ethereum could move from the less efficient one to the more efficient one. That's like a big discussion right now. And then I think an interesting discussion is the governance of public blockchains in particular, because it happens at different levels. Some people are writing the code. So the Bitcoin core developers, 3 of them are actually paid for by MIT, but we don't tell them what to do. They're writing this code for what we think as infrastructure. Then there's this network of miners. They have to agree what code to run. That's, opt-in. It's extreme democracy. No one can tell them what to do. And then if they decide, okay, we're not going to do this anymore, we're going to fork, they could just do that. Like, no one can prevent them. So governance, I think, is a really interesting question around blockchains.
Yeah, there's a professor here, Silvio, who's got a company now called Algorand, which is working to produce a different version of the blockchain that may be a little more stable or able to scale in a different, efficient way. So I would say I really respect Philipp's. It's end of the 80s in the technological advancement. So we can talk about all the cool things, Dust protocol, which is identity, all this stuff, but it's still so early. And so I'd think of this less as like the foundational tech is really solid and right and smart and substantial and all that sort of stuff. But for it to impact each of us and this tech's going to be cool and I'm going to use it tomorrow, we're 3, 5, 10 years out. And so, the unfortunate truth is this thing moves so fast in our perception of it. It's like, playing with the internet at TCP/IP, protocol layer. And we're all now aware of it, but it's still TCP/IP level, right? We didn't do that. We work with the internet as it is. So there's tons of advancements every day. People are good at promoting what they're doing. People are, building great things. But I think it's going to take some time before any of us go, oh, that I use, right? And that's how I use it. Yeah.
Question for both of you. If people want to learn more about blockchain or more broadly distributed ledger, are there sites or sources that you would point people to?
CoinDesk is probably the most sort of well-known. They've got some great tools. They've got good news. There's some like Cointelegraph is like the trashy USA Today of blockchain media. They're good too. I like there's a bunch of them. Look up Coin Media, you'll see a ton. But CoinDesk is probably the simplest, easiest. You'll get current news on.
And on the credentialing side, the W3C is actually a pretty good community to learn more. There's a few groups, the Community Credentialing Group, the Verifiable Credentials Group, the Decentralized Identifiers Group. So they're all very technical, but they're pretty friendly and they're extremely open and transparent.
Right. Any podcasts that you guys like on either crypto or Bitcoin?
Laura Shin's Unchained is probably she's got great people and leads really good stuff.
I like that one. I listened to there's one you can find on blockchain.global. There's a guy that does a weekly interview in blockchain and crypto, and they're good, aimed at a pretty general audience. Another resource, if you want to look specifically to education, a couple months ago we posted a blog on gettingsmart.com of 20 applications that we might see in education of blockchain. So just search blockchain on Getting Smart and you'll find that.
And actually one obvious one, the Digital Currency Initiative here at MIT, they actually have a pretty good website and they're not focused exclusively on currencies. But there's events here that are happening that are open to the public, and they try to kind of share what they're doing. And they're surprisingly critical of a lot of the applications, especially ICOs. And so it's an interesting, I think, perspective that they have.
Last question. I think the next panel is on artificial intelligence. any link between the two? Is machine learning making particular applications of in blockchain more interesting?
I go first. I mean, obviously, if you bring together blockchain and machine learning, then there's going to be 14 people here on the panel in terms of the hype level. But
AI had AI.
But I think there is something to look into around. These machine learning algorithms need access to a huge amount of data. We don't have a great way right now of giving them access to data in a way that protects the individual who owns that data, but still benefit from the analytics that you only get if you have a massive amount of data. And so having ways where through cryptographic processes you could disclose only specific information, or even it could be a rather than giving someone your date of birth, the application could ask, are you over 18? And you could verifiably say yes without ever having to say how much older. So I think there's something there around access to data and controlling access to your own data while still benefiting from the power of AI.
Another question?
Yeah. I would just say probably the easiest way to think about how all these things intersect. So every time I go to check into a hotel, I pull out my credit card, and as I'm watching them swipe that credit card, I'm thinking about all of the downstream things that are about to happen, right? The first is it's my number and info's on this piece of plastic, and then as soon as that payment processor hits, it goes into a database, which will get hacked, and then Equifax will get it somewhere, that'll get hacked, and then all this information is happening, and then all of those companies are running machine learning programs to understand me as a buyer so that they can market other stuff to me, okay? And so the question, how all these end up tying together on some level is, that moment of, it won't be a credit card, but a thing you produce in order to get into that hotel, that whole stream of information is now protected all the way through. The hotel really has no access to it. And the models, I think it's entirely correct, the models that end up in the systems to help that hotel market to you better or otherwise will be protected. So you're all this, swipe that credit card, think of us. That's what you should do, yeah.
Good. Deborah, anything? All right. Help me thank Dave and Philip.